I'm Leslie Anderson. I'm the Director of Collections, Exhibitions, and Programs at the National Nordic Museum in Seattle. Welcome to Nordic Talks, Food Security and Sustainability, a series of 4 panels in which leading innovators and advocates for sustainable food practices and conservation discuss solutions to contemporary issues in the areas of fine dining, food processing and packaging, and agriculture. Leaders from the Nordic region and the state of Washington are participating in this series to increase awareness and to inspire positive actions for a more secure and sustainable world. This is the second panel in the series, and it's titled Tastemakers, Affecting Change in Food Processing and Packaging. This panel investigates how companies in the Nordic countries and the US demonstrate their commitment to sustainable strategies to maximize growth and to minimize waste. How do companies commit to sustainability in this arena while being mindful of the bottom line? What are the greatest challenges faced by businesses that wish to adopt or adhere to sustainable practices? And how can companies demonstrate to consumers their commitment to sustainability? These are all questions to be explored in this panel. The National Nordic Museum wishes to thank the Nordic Council of Ministers for their support, as well as the Embassy of Finland in the United States, the Barbara Osher Per Suecia Foundation, and ScanDesign. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce this panel's moderator, Christopher Burke. Christopher Burke is advisor for sustainable growth and commerce at the Embassy of Finland in Washington, D.C., where he concentrates on energy, climate, circular economy, and emerging technology policies. Prior to his current role, he most recently served with the staff of the United States House of Representatives Subcommittee on Europe, Eurasia, Energy, and the Environment. Chris previously held a variety of professional roles in public policy, program management, and academia in Washington, Beijing, and Dallas. He holds a Master's of Science in Energy Policy and Climate from the Johns Hopkins University. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Leslie. As she said, I'm Chris Burke. I work for the Embassy of Finland as an advisor for sustainable growth and trade, and I'm excited to be with you for the second Nordic Talks, Tastemakers, Affecting Change in Food Processing and Packaging. I'm here with a number of experts from Nordic countries and the United States, eager to talk about a lot of this material in the hour that we have with us. And so before we get into the questions, I'd like to take a moment for each of our panelists to speak with us today and introduce themselves and what's happening at their companies. So first we'll start with Stephanie. Stephanie at Scoop Marketplace, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chris. My name is Stephanie Lentz, and I own a zero-waste grocery store in the Seattle area. So I sell package-free food, home goods, and personal care products for people to purchase in their own reusable containers. And then I also have a digital business, and I teach people how to open zero-waste stores around the world.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then we have Hjalti. Would you like to introduce yourself, Hjalti?
Thank you, Chris. My name is Hjalti, and I lead the software division at Morale. Morale is an Icelandic company founded in 1983. We focus on food processing equipment, and the vision of the company is to transform the way food is processed in a sustainable and affordable way. And software is an integral part of that. So you could say that I'm both the Nordic and Seattle area, since I live in Seattle, but work for an Icelandic company.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And Kaisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chris. I'm Kaisa Jaakkola, and I'm working for Finnair Group, and mainly the part of it called Finnair Kitchen, which is responsible for airline catering in the Finnair network. Finnair is the Finnish flag carrier, and of course aiming for carbon neutral aviation by 2045, and as part of that also sustainable and carbon neutral catering.
Fabulous, fabulous. Well, I'm so glad to have you all here, and I'm glad to get into the discussion. And maybe we'll start with a basic question that you know, some of it is just defining the terms of what we're discussing here. So maybe Hjalti, you'd like to start. What does it mean for sustainable food processing and packaging for your company? And how would you define it maybe for your sector?
When I think about sustainability, it's being able to repeat what we're doing for generations to come, and hopefully in a better way, whether it's my children or their children, is that we have enough resources. We have the world around us that we are responsible for. So it touches really on everything. It can be yield of the food that is being processed. Are we harvesting too much? Could we maybe reduce the harvesting by increasing the yield? All the way over to carbon footprint of the equipment. So we tend to think about sustainability in a very holistic way.
Great. And Stephanie, maybe you'd like to come in from your angle. What does food processing and packaging in a sustainable way mean for you?
For us, it means eliminating the need for disposable packaging whenever possible. So really creating loop systems where people can use the same containers over and over again. And we're also encouraging people to use what they already have instead of having to go out and buy those containers, just before they put something into the recycling bin, thinking, can I use this, or could my neighbor use this, or asking neighbors for them to save their glass pasta jars and things like that.
Great. And Kaisa, would you like to have your company's views on sustainable food processing and packaging come forward?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same themes, but in different viewpoint that Stephanie and Hjalti already mentioned, that it's really, at least for airline catering, we still have quite a lot of issue with the food waste and packaging material. So reducing, reusing, and recycling.
Fantastic. And then, of course, one of the major things on everyone's mind when they get into the commercial side of sustainability is its impact on profitability. Some people could see it as an opportunity to go forward. Some people are worried about the short-term bottom line. Maybe we'll start with Stephanie this time. How do you combine profitability with sustainability practices?
That is a very challenging question, especially because I own a grocery store. So Scoop Marketplace is a food-focused grocery store. We sell bulk foods, and conventionally, the profit margins on groceries are quite slim. So one of the things that I've noticed, especially as I'm teaching people how to open zero-waste stores, is there tends to be some dissonance between being a mission-driven business owner and then having to have a financially sustainable business so that you can have an impact for your community. So I think there are some barriers there around just working through the mindset, the money mindset that's involved, and saying, in order for you to have a successful business and for you to serve your community well, have a positive impact for the planet, you have to make a profit. That's the only way this is going to work. So that there's also some issues there with, sometimes people don't want to pay more. It can cost more to shop in this way just because you're working with smaller businesses that have higher overhead. And when you shop intentionally, there can be some other expenses that come with that. Because when you buy cheap things, right, there's always some expense. Someone else is paying for your products, even if you aren't, whether that's unfair labor laws or whatever might be happening. So there's just a lot of education that goes into this in order for us to get to a point where we can make it profitable. So I still have a very new business. And one of the ways that I am making that happen as part of our growth strategy is to introduce my knowledge business and to start teaching people what I know so that I can add that revenue stream to continue to grow the zero waste grocery store itself.
Right. And that makes sense, especially as a new business and tackling all these things with the sustainability kind of at the forefront of your new model. And Kaisa, you're kind of coming in from a different angle with airlines are kind of an established business model, but bringing sustainability to the conversation when airlines have been around for, well, almost a century, I guess now. And so how do you combine profitability with your elements within Finnair and the airline industry in general?
Yeah, it's actually going to be 100 years very soon, and everyone's happy about the anniversary coming up. But yeah, the sustainability and profitability, they have to be, you cannot compromise the other. At least we believe coming out of this pandemic, we have to be also sustainable. So it's really like you have to get a lot of those deals. And in aviation, it's sometimes that they are actually on the same side, because a lot of the biggest expense on airline is from the kerosene or the fuel you use during the flight. So if you decrease the weight during the flight, you really save in the fuel and the euros, so you end up with being actually sustainable at the same time as profitable.
So one real life example about combining sustainability and profitability in airline catering would be the milk we serve on flights. For example, a lot of flights they use for practical use is the little milk jiggers with like 12 milliliters of milk. But you can of course pack the flight with 500 milliliter packages or even bigger containers of milk. And by using those, you actually decrease the waste and decrease the cost for milk. Of course, you increase the labor for cabin crew, but it's one example on how to make both sustainable and profitable changes to your customer service.
Well, that's really interesting that one trade-off with the other, but in the end, the bottom line can still be served. And Hjalti, did you want to contribute? Your food processing and packaging is the core of your business, and you've been around not a whole century, but also have been around for a few decades now. So, what does your company see this as involved in with its profitability and sustainability practices coming together?
Yeah, I think I'd like to echo some of the things that both Stephanie and Kaisa said. It is challenging for small business owners to do both at the same time. Everyone realizes the importance of sustainability. At the end of the day, you still need to pay salary at the end of the month or every 2 weeks, whatever the pay cycle is. So what we're trying to do is how do we make it impactful in the short term? Well, we have the means to invest for the longer term, for decades, or we want to enable our customers to be more sustainable every month. And that is through software solutions that help with yield, but we're also working on a future solution that we've already announced, so I'm not revealing secrets here, but it's a planning solution that really helps the food producer do demand-driven planning. And that can have massive impact in terms of what are they producing and what time to minimize the waste of food down the line. So I think it's a topic that everyone realizes is very important to invest in, but we also need to help everyone make sustainability something that they benefit from in the short term.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And to come back to you on that, when you're looking at kind of everywhere along the processing spectrum and pipeline and processing, how do you measure all of that? You know, sustainability can be kind of conceptual and but in the end, one of the ways that you can kind of make such an impact is to understand where you're starting from, where you're trying to get to, and then take measurements along the way. What are the measurements that your company is most concerned with? I imagine with a lot of the processing, every ounce counts. And so I was curious of what, beyond just the bottom line, but kind of the intermediate variables that you look at and you can see where you're making progress and then maybe where you want to go.
Yeah, think about it in two ways. One is Marel as a company, and what are we doing ourselves to be more sustainable? And then it's our products towards our customers. Marel as a company actually is one of the first to have sustainability related financing. And this was made public in our annual report, I believe about a year ago, that we have financing so that our interest rates actually become lower as we are more sustainable. So we have a direct, and this was deliberate because we want to be more sustainable. We turn it into a direct business impact. So we measure everything in terms of how much steel we're using, the carbon footprint, how much water we're using, and we aim to be carbon neutral, and we have sustainability metrics on anything that we manufacture. So that is our internal focus. Externally, for the products that we offer, that is more about the yield, traceability, planning, and that we can measure directly, especially yield. We are now working on a trial with one customer where we're measuring the water consumption and the carbon footprint. So they will actually have they call it a green dashboard, where they will see on a day-to-day basis what is their water consumption and carbon footprint. So those are the kind of solutions that we want to help our customers with.
Oh, fantastic! And so that's always available to them when they are interacting with your system and your representative.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic! And then Stephanie, I've watched some of your programs online on YouTube and other places where you're putting forward your sustainability measures. Maybe you'd like to tell our audience about what you're doing at your marketplace.
You know, it's actually very similar to what Hjalti was just saying, but on a much smaller scale at this point in time. So this was the first year that we put out an impact report or a sustainability report. And so that really gave us the framework to establish those goals, not just internally, but also, you know, for our community members to be able to see, and gave us a reason. You know, there's so many things to think about with a small business, so many things to keep track of and to do. And so this was really our opportunity to establish those goals in a very clear way and identify how we were going to measure and track them. So things like having our team members track their carbon emissions when they're coming to and from the store to work, or measuring certain types of products that we bring in and the containers that are getting used, which ones are sent back and refilled with more product. And we're actually weighing the waste that's going to the landfill, waste that's going to recycling. We work with Ridwell in the area. They do specialty recycling. You can have a subscription just at your residence. You can have a Ridwell box and they'll come and pick up if you have recycling items that are difficult to get rid of. And then we're also working on a tool for our community members to be able to see if they purchase a reusable straw, for example, for them to be able to calculate how many disposable straws that's replacing and the positive impact that that is having in the long run. So those pieces are all in the works, but it's been exciting to work through that and to see that starting to come together. And we're in the process of completing the construction in our new location, and we'll actually be displaying some of those goals visually in the store so that our customers, when they come in, they can watch us track our progress throughout the year.
Oh, so, and that sounds in some ways similar to what Hjalti was mentioning about the customers are always going to be able to be informed, and that transparency is there for them to make their decisions and understand what your company is bringing to the table. And then Kaisa, is that the same for Finnair? What is the what is your role within Finnair? What is it? What would you like to say about that measurements?
Yeah, well, it's pretty quiet in Helsinki-Vantaa airport right now because of the corona restrictions still in place. But what is currently ongoing, we are of course preparing for the future, and we still have 1 year to go in our circular economy targets for reducing plastic and food waste. And also we aim for 50% plastic recycling rate at Helsinki hub. So we are working towards those targets, even though it's pretty quiet at the moment. And as Stephanie also mentioned, we are also collaborating a lot with the community around Helsinki-Vantaa. So it's, especially now due to the corona situation, we have a lot of extra items. So we have been able to collaborate with a lot of the different communities in Vantaa area to donation, shelters, and that kind of stuff.
And that leads me to my next question about the pandemic. Has obviously, been a huge challenge for so many individuals, communities, and companies along the way. Over the past, I guess, 16, 17 months, we've seen a number of businesses really challenged and a number of employees really challenged. And one of the things that can be impacted by that is attempts to move in a more sustainable direction or implement changes, but it also might be an opportunity to step back and say, wait, what kind of company do we want to be? What kind of practices do we want to engage in? And where can we start to see some opportunities for maybe a new direction or more sustainable efforts? And so you've mentioned a little bit about that with regard to Finnair, but in general, and whoever wishes to step forward can tackle the question first. How has the pandemic affected your business plans, and particularly the sustainability efforts or its company's vision for moving forward in a more sustainable direction?
I can try to start. Let's say it has changed the focus, at least the short-term focus, in a significant way. To let companies to think more broadly about sustainability is that it's not sustainable unless you have food safety. And so food safety, I would say, has been incorporated to a certain degree into the sustainability conversation that I've seen in the last year, and become much more important than it was before. Awareness, of course, of the importance of food safety. And that has actually, in some ways, elevated the overall conversation of sustainability, which is a very good thing. Now, I will admit that probably in the first months after the pandemic hit, it was more focused on the quality control and the food safety part. But I'm seeing now the overall conversation getting back on track in terms of, let's not think about just the quality, but what is the overall supply chain, as we mentioned, the packaging, the shipping, and the carbon footprint, the yield, and everything end to end. And quality is a component of that. But I think it was in some ways I'm not sure if it's good to say it, but blessing in disguise. I mean, you deal with the what's happening around you in a certain way. And what we have seen is companies have been really mature about how to think about sustainability. And like I said, think about the quality of the food, making sure that you as a consumer, you know where it's coming from and that it's safe.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, especially when food is so essential to everything that you do, and people are more thinking about health and what they're putting around themselves, putting around their families, or giving to their families. And then Stephanie, obviously starting a new business in such a challenging time and encountering this kind of this hurdle of the pandemic, to put it mildly. How has it been able to affect your business? Both obviously some hurdles along the way for almost everyone, but also what has it maybe allowed you to propel forward or kind of see things in a different way?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be learned from what has happened in the last year and a half. And I think one of the first things was that it really helped to illuminate what are the most essential services that people are looking for and that they need, and just, gave us something to work with to plan for that in the future, to make sure that we've made partnerships so that we can keep those certain products in stock. And we were able to meet the demand, especially during that first wave of, I always refer to it as the pandemic panic purchasing, when everyone wanted flour. I was very, very fortunate. I did not run out of flour. And so I was kind of the go-to spot in my neighborhood, which was really nice. And it also helped us to focus on what is within our control. So one of the big challenges for us is that we actually had some new legislation in this area that had been passed to make it easier to use your own container, whether you're, taking food to go from a restaurant or shopping at a grocery store or whatever that might be. And even though it had been passed, of course, because of 2020, it just got shelved. It was just put on hold. And so that we had to get creative again. And it was just a reminder to not rely on that, to not rely on those systems, and to make sure that we have systems in place that will allow us to live as sustainably as is, realistically possible for us, regardless of what those laws are. So that it was discouraging in a sense. A lot of people, I was hearing people say things like, is this the end of zero waste? And it was kind of funny to me. I thought it was really dramatic because I thought it was a wake-up call, and I assumed that everyone would be excited to make changes to their daily habits. And I do think that's what's happened. And like Hjalti said, they're taking it more seriously. It's not just this superficial, like we should do these sustainable things, or we should have this performative sustainability, in our businesses, but it was a more primal, personal, what is my future if I do not contribute to a sustainable future where we can all thrive indefinitely? And I think people are taking more ownership in a very real way. And then there's still There's still question marks with that. We still come up against, like I said, the added expense of being a conscious consumer and living intentionally, and the discomfort. And just as humans, we're so prone to, if we aren't intentional about putting those good habits in place, we will fall right back into what's comfortable and familiar from before. But I think that just, concepts like progress over perfection and focusing on those little steps, and throughout 2020 being able to really dig into what can I control, what action can I take, what is within my power right now, and letting the rest of it go, instead of trying to present as this like perfectly sustainable human, and then when it stops working out, it just all falls apart.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, and I think everybody's just trying to agree with you about making sure that we do the best we can under these challenging circumstances, and that's really true in sustainability and so many other things in this difficult year. Hopefully, we're emerging from it. And then I wanted to ask, in general, and kind of on that question of making progress rather than going for perfection, and that could be true with your internal practices and internal measurements, but also so many of you, all three of you, different kinds of companies, are going to interact with suppliers and vendors and subcontractors around the world and locally. And you may be able to measure what's going on in your company, but how can you make sure that the partners and vendors that you're dealing with are upholding their proclaimed commitments? And it's not just like you said, a performative sustainability effort, but it's actually something that they're measuring, whether it's in supplying packaging, supplying the actual food products, disposing of the waste and other materials, or recycling in a way that it's actually carried out, not just taken away and then everybody forgets about it. Maybe Kaisa, you'd like to start about, because you have vendors all over the world that you're dealing with, from Beijing to New York to Helsinki, obviously. What are the ways that you kind of burrow down or drill down to see that your vendors are doing the things that your company thinks are important?
Well, Finnair is buying catering in an international network, as all airline caterings doing long haul operations do. So of course we deal a lot with different catering operators in different regulatory environments. And for example, for food safety, there's very common shared guidelines that all airline caterings are following, but there's really no guidelines for sustainability or environmental activities. And that is sometimes very visible when we do the food safety or environmental audits at our suppliers. For example, recycling or donating food waste, or for example, even producing food in a sustainable manner is sometimes, it's not, I think there could be better guidelines that could be followed everywhere in that, because the procedures, they are pretty similar everywhere. So sometimes we push for change by just bringing up the topic. And I know one topic that Hjalti is very passionate about is traceability. And that is also something that we quite often ask about: what is the country of origin and where does this ingredient come from? And that is something that is not very strong in airline catering yet. At least it's not visible to the customers. I think in the background, it's on very good level. You can actually trace back the ingredients because of the food safety, but it's not visible to the passengers. So that's a shame.
Well, that's interesting. Hjalti, would you like to pick up on that, and traceability and sustainability practices with your vendors and suppliers?
Yeah, I think, we do in all our vendor selection, we look at their sustainability. When they have metrics, of course, we look directly at those. We have certain questions when we're doing RFPs related to sustainability. Even though we're now about $1.5 billion US dollars in revenue, we're still not at the size where we can dictate you must have this. There are certain parts that we need in our machines that we have to have, and so we're subject to those. But we do, in all cases, when we have two options, we do pick the vendor that is more sustainable. So we are very conscious about that in all our supply chain. Also how we do inventory, that's a very, you could say, it has both direct and indirect implications in terms of cost and sustainability. You could say we're doing it because of profit, but of course we look at the sustainability at the same time. How do we minimize transportation in all our inventory around the world? So this is how we operate as a company. As Kaisa mentioned, towards our customers, this is more about helping. How can we help them in the best way so they can become more sustainable? We educate, promote, but then it's ultimately up to them at what level or what degree they choose to focus on that as a topic.
Interesting. So again, progress over perfection, and that leads me back to Stephanie. How are you, as in kind of a different scale, dealing with suppliers and vendors to verify, that they are in line with your commitments and with their own?
It's a very vulnerable process for me, especially being, so close to my community members and so close to my customers. There is a lot of responsibility, and they do really trust us to work with the right vendors and to find the right products. And that's what I want. I want to build that trust, and that's a service that I want to provide to my community so that they don't come in and feel like they have to pull their phone out and research every product. The idea is that we've done that for them. And that can mean that sometimes we discover that we've made mistakes, or that a question didn't get asked, or that we didn't, quite realize everything that was going on. And we keep asking questions, and we keep checking in, and we talk about, what are your plans for making changes in the future? How could we discuss some creative options for you to provide, a reusable option or a bulk product that you haven't considered before? And we do have, same thing. We have a list of questions that we ask. We have a list of things that are just non-negotiables, and we don't compromise. And then there are other things, and this is for any individual, whether you're a business owner or not. Sustainability is just multifaceted, and we all prioritize different elements of it, and we'll prioritize different pieces of it in certain situations. And so there might be some products where we say, actually, the local option, even though we would prefer to choose local, this local option isn't the quality that we expect, and they're compromising on maybe some other issue, like maybe they are using single-use plastics or something like that. And then we'll start to look elsewhere, where in other cases, we would always prioritize local, and we want to, support our local farmers and be connected to that community as well. So there is a give and take, and then there are some very clear boundaries. Like, we do not compromise these things, and our community knows that, and they can expect to have those standards for any product that they encounter.
And I think that speaks to kind of where we're going in that relationship building. It's that you're kind of the interface with your community with some of these practices and these vendors. They trust you, and over time they come to rely on your judgment and then allow you to go forward and be their voice in the marketplace, in a sense of communicating with their vendors and kind of reflecting their values, reflecting their commitments, and that can build up over years and decades.
And maybe, Chris, if I could add, I should have mentioned before, because Stephanie mentioned the non-negotiables. Yes, we do, because I indicated there are certain places where we're unable to dictate terms or dictate sustainability, but we do have a baseline that is non-negotiable. So if that is not met, then we look for other solutions. But once we are beyond this sort of base level of non-negotiable, yes, then the market dynamic kicks in, and we go for the most sustainable solution.
So, interesting. So, and have those, as you build relationships with your customers and of course with vendors, but the consumers that you're kind of engaged with, and maybe new consumers that you plan to reach, have you seen that consumers, when they're in Seattle, around the world, in Helsinki, folks that are buying plane tickets online or buying them for all over the world, have they started to come with different emphasis. In other words, their priorities maybe evolve over time. Some people maybe 30 years ago weren't thinking about carbon emissions, and now it's on everybody's mind. And maybe back to you, Hjalti, on that. You've been measuring these efforts for a long time and collecting data, but it's also about what data is important to your customers. Maybe you've tracked it internally for a long time, but what have you seen that in your kind of consumers and the preferences that you're seeing in the marketplace?
Probably the biggest shift that I've seen it would probably be in the last 5 years is that sustainability, traceability have shifted from being a regulatory requirement, a burden, to a competitive advantage. And that's how companies are starting to think about it. And there are many producers that say, because of their sustainability or traceability, they can guarantee the origin of the food, that they're able to get a better placement in food markets or in retail. They're able to get more demand. Now, as has been mentioned, there is sometimes a premium, but I'm seeing that premium go down, and this has become more of a consumer demand rather than a regulatory. So that is a big change for companies having to do something because of regulations versus because their customers want it.
And Kaisa, are you seeing the same thing? Your customers that you're hearing back in whether it's the feedback that you're getting directly from them or just the studies that you know about the market, that sustainability and food processing, packaging, and overall is something that airline customers are paying more attention to?
Yeah, there's definitely a big change going there, and all airlines, I guess, they follow very closely what their passengers are saying, and at least for Finnair passengers, it has been clear that, for example, plastic waste, food waste, that kind of topics, they feel very passionate about them. Maybe it's more concrete than some of the carbon emissions created during the flight, so you focus on that during the flight. So it is definitely a topic that is very interesting for our passengers. And especially Finnish passengers, they are asking for the country of origin for different ingredients, which I think is very nice, because that way we can actually push for that information to be delivered in the global network.
Well, that's very interesting. Even when they're asking of the origins of things on a flight, that's fascinating. And then maybe what's next? We've been through a challenging year and a half. We've seen the growth of sustainability as an important measurement, but also a market opportunity. People are thinking about new questions about health and safety and economic opportunity, and hopefully we'll start to see an economic rebound both in North America, Europe, and beyond. So what are you seeing next for your company or your sector overall? And what will your sustainability priorities for the future look like? Maybe Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Our mission is to normalize zero waste shopping. And obviously that is, when you talk about changing human behavior on that level, that's a pretty big task. But our approach to it is, we want to teach people how they can actually improve the quality of their lives while they're learning to walk more gently on the planet. And I think that we are perfectly primed to do that. And I know there was some hesitation last year. A lot of zero waste shop owners were feeling uncertain. Is this the right time to act on this dream? Are people even comfortable shopping in bulk when they might be sharing scoops or things like that? But I think that we are on the cusp of this really becoming not just a trend, not just a social media trend, because it certainly is trendy, but how do we transform that into a lifestyle that can sustain us for forever? And we're having to, this is not a new way of shopping, shopping package free. This isn't new. We're just reviving the shopping methods of the generations past in order to give ourselves a healthier hereafter. So my hope is that we continue to grow Scoop Marketplace itself and serve our local community, and that through Scoop Intelligence, we'll be able to continue to help people open zero waste stores and serve their communities in a similar way. And I think that the impact is going to grow exponentially. I've seen so many new zero waste shop owners, especially in Europe. In the UK, those Facebook groups of zero waste shop owners in UK are so full, and people are actually experiencing a lot of competition even in their small towns. But it's starting to take off here in the US as well, and I think it's exciting. It's a very energizing and inspiring for me, and I feel like I started at just the right time, that I can actually be positioned as someone who can share my knowledge and my resources and my experiences, because I don't think that everyone should have to start from scratch. I don't think it's a good use of our personal resources in terms of our time and our energy for us all to go out and research the same things and make the same mistakes so that we can build the same stores. I want us to be able to learn from one another so that we can accelerate our progress and have a bigger impact overall.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that learning along the way is great, but also, like you said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And that solutions that work for one may be transferable to many others. And with Hjalti and Kaisa, which one of you would like to go first is up to you. But what are your priorities? What's next for your companies and your sector?
Well, I can go first. I think in short term, as Stephanie mentioned already, during the pandemic, some of the small things like decreasing package waste and that kind of things, they were put on a bit of on hold due to the hygiene concerns. So I think that is going to be going back to normal, and perhaps even more towards the reduction of plastic waste.
And maybe Hjalti, you'd like to pick up there of what's coming forward and for the future for your sector and for your company.
Short answer is I don't know. I would say change, transformation in a certain sense, or change. It's what is interesting is that the pandemic has struck us not only in a very deep emotional way personally, but it has, I think, in a certain sense, shook the core foundation of society. I know this sounds dramatic, but if we think about it, how we interact, how we go to work, all of this is changing. And that means a lot of things. I mean, I used to, for a few years, commute regularly between Copenhagen and Helsinki, in on Mondays, back on Fridays, not thinking about it. Well, today would I do it, or would I do a Zoom meeting every other time? We go to the office always 8 or 9 o'clock and back home at 5. That is changing. And that has implications on food processing, how you schedule airlines, how you set up retail stores. It is touches on everything. I mean, you as a food processor, you used to be able to rely on people eat breakfast at home, lunch somewhere around work, and then they do dinner at home or maybe at a restaurant on average once, twice a month. You can predict that. There's no way to do that anymore. And that will, I think, unleash innovation, change, and more demand for products that help customers and consumers make the choice, and they will be in the driver's seat going forward.
Oh, that's fascinating. So maybe a moment of uncertainty, but a moment of opportunity as well.
Excitement.
Yeah. And then, so we have a few minutes left, and I'd just like to provide everyone an opportunity, kind of an open floor, to say what is kind of a key point that you want folks to know about our audience. A lot of different folks, people that are on the consumer end, people in the business sector, people in policymaking realms in North America and Europe and beyond, local level, national level. Based on what we've talked about today, what is kind of a key moment or a key aspect that you want to highlight for our audience, and things that we can start to think about today in that uncertain path forward, but something that people should have in mind in regarding to food processing and packaging in a sustainability kind of sphere. Stephanie, would you like to start?
I think a big thing is just asking for what you want, taking a moment to envision your personal sustainable future and what that means to you and what elements are included, what kind of businesses are creating your community culture and adding value for you. And even as Kaisa was saying about the customers, asking about the food on the airplane. Honestly, that had never occurred to me. It never would have occurred to me that I could influence that as a consumer. Whereas with my customers who come into my store, I expect them to influence our product selection every single day. So just using your voice and, hopefully this doesn't sound cliche, but voting with your dollars. And, that's what helps to determine what gets to stick around is if you fund it as a consumer and just the choices that you make on a day-to-day basis, people saying, well, does it really make a difference if I say no straw, please? Or if I bring my own bag, I'm just one person. But the impact from one person, even if you didn't impact anyone around you, the impact from one person changing their actions is significant. And beyond that, there are people around you. There are people around you who are going to notice your habits, and you might not even think about it. There are people who come behind me in the grocery store, and I know they look at the way that I shop, and sometimes they ask me questions about it. And there's always an opportunity whether or not words are exchanged. So don't discount your personal ability to have a significant impact in creating that future that we all so desire.
Absolutely. And Yalti, would you like a key highlight that you want to emphasize for our audience today?
Standards. Probably directed to governments or regulatory bodies is focus more on standardizing how, whether it's labeling or requirements for food and food safety, standardizing between countries rather than making the perfect standard for your country. Because the supply chain is global and consumers are global. I want to make sure that if I'm flying Finnair, Helsinki to Hamburg, so I've done a few times, that when I land, I can make the same choice. The packaging is, well, maybe not the same language, but how the measurements are. That traceability information is the same, that I can make the same choices as a consumer. And for businesses, that there are no mistakes in the full traceability chain around the world. So, I mean, there are many things that I would, you could always say, I want to leave, but probably standards would be one of them.
Right. And then somebody who's dealing with a lot of markets around the world with Finnair, Kaisa, maybe you'd like to talk about what you're looking to highlight and have our audience take away today as we wrap up and give you the final word.
Well, thinking about going back to not normal, but the new normal after pandemic, it's going to become historical because the flight network has been really put down during the pandemic. So I think it's a very nice opportunity for a fresh start to actually think what we did the previous time is perhaps not so important now, and we should really listen to the customer voice, what they are actually want, what do they want to have to eat during the flight, or what kind of drinks they want to have, what kind of packaging or service is actually important during the flights. And it's not actually a single company or customer dialogue, it's actually a collaboration and huge task between the network of different airlines and airline caterings and other suppliers in the network, as well as the customers, of course. So I think it's a nice opportunity, and hopefully aviation will take it, and we will be much more sustainable and transparent also in terms of the food after this pandemic.
Well, absolutely something to look forward to, and I wish you all the best of luck with your plans going forward, both in sustainability and profitability. We have a great group that was able to join us today. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Yalti. Thank you, Kaisa. And thank you for the opportunity from Stina and Leslie at the National Nordic Museum in the Nordic Talks, Tastemakers Affecting Change in Food Processing and Packaging. It's been a pleasure to join you from the Embassy of Finland. I'm Chris Burke, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Thank you so much for joining us.